This week on the Orange Box podcast, we talk about a new set of PlayStation 1 remasters being hinted at, a GameCube and PS2 cult classic potentially returning, Xbox simultaneously dying and thriving, and more. All of this tonight, but first, on to that beautiful Bean intro. Welcome to the place where PC and console gaming talk combine. This is the Orange Box Podcast, episode 43. I am your host, the man who is currently beating up monsters with an umbrella and sucking their blood with his mind, Nathan, also known as the Frozen Gamer 87. And joining me, as always, the man who will be hired as a last-ditch effort to save the MCU after previously being killed off, Justin, better known as I Am Zaracon. How you doing today? How's your week been?
Oh man, it's still, I guess, a continuation of stuff from the previous week. So as I mentioned before, I currently don't have internet and still don't have any internet. So I've been going back and forth between a couple places just so I can, for when I'm working from home, I need to have internet access. So I've been doing that for the past few days. I'll have to do that again on Friday, so I can have internet access. But then also for tonight, had to go somewhere for that as well. And also related to the reason as to why I lost internet in the first place, I've been helping out with some projects to help out with just like for some like yard stuff. And so once that stuff is done, then we should be able to get the internet checked out. But the problem is we just don't want to call Verizon to come fix things and then someone accidentally cuts the cable again that cuts the cable line ring. And so that's why we're still waiting on that. So once we get everything done, which hopefully will be done by this weekend, like maybe Sunday at the latest, I hope. But once that's done, then we can have Verizon come in, and then should be able to have internet access, which would be great. So there's that. So sort of like because of that, and just because of also working with other things, I just really haven't had time to do much of like gaming stuff related or like at all really. But I did go back and sort of like get back into watching, partially because of you mentioning this the other week before, was the Twilight Zone. And nice. So I couldn't remember where I had left off at, but it was still somewhere between season 3 in the middle. So I went back and finished that up. So ended that, and I don't know when, but I'll be picking up season 4 sometime later on. But then one last thing I did was I sort of started going back to working on a short story that I had started up before. I at least had the outline and concept work developed, but I actually hadn't sat down to write it out. So that I did have time because of not having internet. I decided, just to go ahead and sort of like get back into doing that. But yeah, that's pretty much everything I've been doing.
All right. Yeah. Always a bummer when you just don't have time to play games, but obviously, you had other stuff you had to do, so it's not like you were just twiddling your thumbs. It's just didn't work out, so. So my week has been thankfully much less busy. It was this past Sunday was the last Sunday we were leading at our church, so because we did it, for the whole month of July. So, we did that, and thankfully I've actually had time to make some good progress on things I needed to get done. Like I was able to get the comparison for Ni no Kuni 2 done at a pretty decent time on Saturday, and then got started with recording some stuff, and was able to get all the recording done for my next comparison that's going up next week. I was done with the recording of that sometime yesterday on Tuesday, and then ended up also having enough time to start recording for the comparison that I'm doing 2 weeks from now. So, or rather, let's see here. So it would be the next comparison's going up on the 5th of August. So it would be the 12th of August. That is the, if I'm doing my math correct. So yeah, it should be the 12th of August. So I have the stuff recorded and started editing for the comparison that's going up on the 5th, and for the comparison that's going up the following week, I've started the recording, although I didn't finish it yet. And that one's going to require some reevaluation, figuring out how best to do that, because the bit of recording I did for the game, it was like almost an hour, and I knew that I still had a ways to go to be done with like that opening section, so I haven't fully decided what I'm doing with that yet. I have to kind of figure out if I'm gonna do all of that, or if I'm gonna cut out some portions, or what I want to do. So anyway, but I'll talk more about that when I get to talking about the games I've been playing. Which I guess since you didn't get to play anything this week, I'll just go straight into that. But wait, let me think. I feel like there's something else I needed to mention. Maybe not. I mean, thankfully, I've actually been able to get more stuff done. Just in general, it's been a little bit easier. So, as far as what I've been playing, as I referenced in my intro, most obvious one is Bloodstained Ritual of the Night. I'm at like 70% through the initial map. I just got into the whatchamacallits. It's like Fire Caverns or something like that. I can't remember if that's the name of it. But yeah, I just got in there. Unfortunately, though, as I've been in there, I have... well, the first time I wasn't paying enough attention to my health and then ended up getting killed before I got to a save room. And then the second time, I got a little bit further along, but I just didn't have enough healing items, or just didn't... actually, no, really, it was just not paying close enough attention. Less so than the previous time, but still just enough to where I wasn't able to actually get to a save room. So that's a bit annoying. But as far as the game goes in general, like, I had played a fair amount, and then I stopped for a little bit because I was kind of stuck. I was having a hard time figuring out where to go next, and like I had just a couple of points where I couldn't quite figure out how to proceed. And I think with the bosses in general, I haven't had major issues. Trying to think. I think there was one that I had a little more difficulty with, but I don't remember. Oh, it was the chick with the blood umbrella. It took me several tries, but she wasn't really that bad. It was more just kind of figuring out how to avoid her attacks and making sure I had enough healing items to basically just kind of tough it out until I could beat her. But I was able to beat her, and it's kind of funny because initially, after I got the ability that she gives, which is I can't remember, it's blood something or other. I mean, you'd think I would remember it because I've used it enough times to where it's like I should remember the name of it. But anyway, it's like the description of the ability is that you can drain blood from enemies to heal yourself. And so I'm like trying to figure out, okay, why is this not doing anything against enemies? And eventually I figure out, it's because basically it's kind of like a random chance whether or not enemies will bleed when you attack them, and they have to bleed, and then you can absorb the blood from the stains on the ground. So, but what's funny about that is, like, there's one point, of course, where I'm stuck. I have no idea where to go next. I start looking at a guide, and then someone mentions that blood fountain, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I didn't think of that. It's like, this is an obvious way to use this ability, and so, I was able to use that and get past there, and then I've made some more progress. I was actually kind of surprised. Well, let me back up. So initially, I ended up getting one of the bad endings because I didn't know that I wasn't supposed to fight her brother, and so I fought him and I beat him pretty easily, and then I got game over. And so of course then I went back and searched around and made more progress from there. But when I fought spoiler, the clone that you fight, which they don't even like really do a whole lot story-wise to explain that, other than kind of through some of the journal entries, but I think it took me a few tries, but it still wasn't too bad. Basically, as long as I had enough healing items, it was just kind of like, okay, I dodged her attacks as best as I could, and then I ended up, beating her after, I think probably took me like maybe 3 tries to beat her. But, yeah, so currently at the Inferno Cave, and still enjoying the game overall. Definitely, just like I said, I've had a few points where I got stuck. There was one point where, like, I had forgotten about one of the abilities that I had, the one that lets you move heavy objects. I had forgotten about how that could be used, and so there's like one room where there's an Iron Maiden, and you can't get past it unless you push it with that ability that lets you push stuff, and I didn't remember that I could do that, and so, like, I'm getting to this, I'm like, okay, I have no idea how to get past this. I'm going to keep moving because it seems like I have to be able to get around it to get to the other side in order to get past it. And then eventually I was reminded, oh yeah, I can push these things with this ability. And so then I was able to move past that and move forward and everything. But yeah, enjoying it overall. I know that there's going to be more to it. I kind of got accidentally spoiled that there's an inverted castle, which, I figured there probably would be something like that anyway, since heavily inspired by Symphony of the Night, and that was a thing in Symphony of the Night and in Harmony of Dissonance. So, but yeah, good stuff. I did decide to jump back into Ni no Kuni 1, because first I wanted to test on my PC and see, okay, how does this run on here? Furthermore, I wanted to find out if that issue that I was having where the left button was having like weird, like it was blah, 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 and just like wasn't actually doing what it was supposed to do. I realized it was kind of like almost acting like it was a turbo function, like it was like when you press it, like it's doing the same action over and over and over. And so I tested it out on my PC, getting pretty average over 200 frames per second. Up to 240, of course, and so I went back to, I played it a little bit on PC, and then I switched back to doing it on Steam Deck, because I thought there has to be some way I can get this working properly. And I'm not sure if it had something to do with the beta that I have for the system version, but it was either that or verifying the integrity of the game files. I'm not entirely sure, but the problem disappeared. It still displays like a weird string of text for the button and everything, but it doesn't give me any issues in terms of like having that turbo function. So I don't have any issues with that. I was able to play quite a bit more. At least I don't know, probably 2 to 3 hours, something like that. And my opinion of this game is still kind of mixed. It's definitely much more slow-paced than the second game. And the battle system, like, I don't mind it. I think I would just like it if it was a little more... I guess I don't even necessarily mind that it's partially turn-based. I think the main thing that I don't like so much about it is I don't like the fact that it goes between being turn-based and action. Because, like, as an alternate example, so you have Final Fantasy VII Remake. That one has kind of a mix of action and turn-based battle system, where it's, well, really it is all action-based, but you still like have command menus, like the actual pause when you bring up your command menu, so that you can select different actions if you don't, just select them through shortcuts and that sort of thing. And of course, when you encounter enemies on the, as you're walking around, it just goes into combat, seamless. It's not like you have the battle transition, the screen transitions into the battle and everything, and so it makes it very seamless. And of course, this game is more like traditional RPGs, or traditional Japanese RPGs, where it'll take you into a separate screen in order to fight the enemies. You have freedom of movement. If you are moving properly and defending properly, you can avoid attacks and/or, defend from them if it's like a bigger, like huge area attack. So it kind of has that going for it, but it's still not, actually action based. So I'm kind of at a point where, like, I'm appreciating it more now that the buttons are working properly, but it's still, I'm not entirely decided on it. And outside of combat, it's also just kind of slow. There's definitely more, I don't know, it's just a slower pace. It's hard to explain. If you've played them, you would know exactly what I'm talking about. If you haven't played it, then you probably wouldn't. But you do at points, and this isn't much of a spoiler, you go back and forth at times between Oliver's world and the magical world. And there's like connections from that standpoint, which once again is, I would say it's kind of a mild spoiler because I'm not really getting into anything specific. But anyway, so it's something that I've just been kind of playing off and on. Like, I played a decent amount, I think, on Saturday after I finished editing my video, just because I wanted to mess with it a bit. And then I think apart from that, I basically only played a little bit earlier today just to record some footage. Trying to think if there's anything else I want to say about that. Once again, great performance on Steam Deck and on PC, so that's all good stuff. But one thing I did decide to play after I got my next Dads in Gaming interview edited is Borderlands 3. So I did that for both the Switch and the Steam Deck, and footage that you'll be seeing here is Steam Deck footage. Borderlands is still fun. It does seem like early on so far the writing is pretty terrible, but honestly, I don't play Borderlands for the story anyway. So, some of the humor I enjoy. The story itself, I'm just kind of like, meh, about. But the humor in general is pretty funny. I think it's not quite as good in this game so far from the bit I played, because I basically just played through the first chapter and a little bit into the second, because the first chapter is really short. But the gameplay is still a lot of fun. It took some fiddling around. I was able to get a pretty consistent 60 FPS on the Steam Deck. And it's kind of like a mixture of all sorts of different settings. Like, there's some ultra, some medium, some low. I looked at a thing on Steam, like the community pages, where someone was talking about, okay, these different settings, these are ones that make a difference in the performance, these ones are not, these are recommendations, and use that in order to best figure things out. But it was pretty much the only way that I could get a pretty consistent 60 frames per second. There was some stuttering when things got a little more intense. I think that if I had turned on VSync, that might have solved the problem, but it's not something that I thought to do at the time. And since, I wasn't going to go back and re-record everything just to test that out. I might still check it out later on just to see if VSync makes a difference, but I'm not too worried about it, because I think before I even consider really diving into that game, I would want to play the rest of Borderlands 2. Now, in terms of how it performs on the Switch, as you would expect, it's around 30 frames per second. It is actually uncapped, so it's all across the board. Like, it can go as high as 60 in some occasions. Most of the time, it's in the 30 to 40 range. Doesn't look as good, of course, though there are times, at least in cutscenes, where actually maybe looks a little bit better. It's just kind of weird the way it is, but of course, it's lower frame rate. Does get a little bit better on the battery life, but I mean, considering it's half the frame rate in general, kind of makes sense. Both games, when you load them initially, the load time is really, really long. Like just loading into the game. After that, it's not too bad. But most of the time, you don't have load times. Like the Switch has some of the load times initially, like character selection and that sort of thing. In when you're initially selecting a character, when you're choosing a character, when you start the game up the first time, that can get a bit longer on the Switch. Steam Deck is, well, like one time it was like I think it was 0.07 seconds that it took to get from the cutscene to the character selection on the Steam Deck, and then on the Switch it was about 7 full seconds. So there was that, but the initial startup was actually longer on the Steam Deck by like a good 15 seconds. And it's over 4 minutes for the startup. So for both of them, and that's not even the first time you're starting it up. That's just every time. So one thing I do want to note, and this is I mean, of course, I make note of this also in the video, which, like I said, I've gotten at least a decent chunk of it edited. You have the option of choosing DirectX 11 or DirectX 12. But with the Steam Deck, you do not want to switch to DirectX 11 because the game will not start up if you do that. There's probably a way to fix it, like going through the INI file, and or maybe setting a launch command, a launch option, setting it to DirectX 12. But if you set it to DirectX 11, it will get to a certain point and then it will crash, and it will just keep doing that every single time. It's impossible to actually get it to boot up if you try switching over to DirectX 11, because it will default to DirectX 12. So I don't know if it's the same way on PC itself, but on the Steam Deck, that is the way it is, and there's no way to avoid that. Because I searched up and down trying to find it. I ended up just uninstalling and reinstalling the game so that it would reset all of the settings, and then I was able to get everything set from there. But I think here, that's pretty much it for that. I mean, like I said, gameplay's fun. I mean, as is the case with any Borderlands game, so it's great from that standpoint. And of course, the game was really cheap on Steam. I got it for $8 when I bought it, and this was like, I don't know, a couple months ago, and I paid only $20 for the Switch version for a physical, which isn't bad at all for a physical. But that's about it for Borderlands. I did start recording for the next comparison, and that's with The Outer Worlds. And yeah, I got to figure out what part of the game I actually want to record, because I was just going to do the beginning of the game. But the thing is, it's like, okay, you have the very beginning portion of the game up until you get your ship, basically. And that's like very short. But then if you want to go through what I would consider really the full opening of the game, which includes like a first major quest, I had almost an hour of recording, and I probably still had a good 20-30 minutes left of the quest. And that was just assuming that I remembered to do the things I needed to do. And since there's a lot of dialogue, there's a lot of that kind of thing, so it's hard to determine what I'm going to do with that. I need to figure it out, and I may just record more footage than I need and then figure out what parts I want to cut out, and just like say, I'm going to cut this portion out so that it's not quite so long, because there's just way too much otherwise. But I think that's everything.
Okay. So yeah, I think I agree with you about having difficulties with the doppelganger boss in Bloodstained, because I definitely remember having a little bit of trouble with her. Granted, I can't remember that boss fight completely, but I do remember having some difficulties there, and that was something there. I'm very interested in knowing or wanting to know why you can't play Borderlands, at least on the Steam Deck, using DirectX 11, because normally it's DirectX 12 that's like the problem.
Right. Yeah.
But like 11, that's very unusual.
Well, it does seem to be something tied to the shift connection with their website for getting like shift codes and stuff, because some of the suggested ways to fix the problem, because basically the problem is connected to that somehow, were specifically unlink your shift account from, through the website, relink it, and then you should be able to do it. Tried that multiple times, didn't do anything. I still ended up with the same error every time. Ultimately kept finding some people were saying that it's changing to DirectX 11 that messes it up, and sure enough, that's exactly what it was.
So weird.
Yeah. And I usually choose DirectX 11 over 12 anyway, because 12 is kind of buggy across the board, but this is one situation where it's like, okay, need to stick to 12.
Yeah. Wow. And one thing, I can't remember if you, I can't remember if you mentioned this or not, but for playing it on the actual PC desktop, did you experience the same issue with the actual same issue with the left button for?
No.
Not
at all.
So it is just like a Switch problem. I mean, a Steam Deck problem.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It was in fact a Steam Deck problem, and like I said, once I updated the beta system software, it went away, because I haven't had any problems with it since.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll definitely keep that in mind. I don't have Ni no Kuni, but it has been a game that's been on my radar to get on sale. But definitely keep that in mind for when I eventually get it, and should I play it sooner than later?
Right.
I'll definitely keep that in mind. Okay.
Any other questions?
No, sir.
All right. Well, let's get into the news, and we have kind of a smattering of positive and negative topics this week. So I think we're going to go ahead and knock out one of the negative ones to start. So can you start us off by talking about this strike with the video game actors?
Sure. All right. So earlier this week, and actually make sure this was correct about it being this week and not sometime.
It was last Friday.
Okay, yeah. So last Friday, SAG-AFTRA, which is pretty much a acting guild. Initially, I thought it was just for like Hollywood, but also it applies to voice actors as well. So video game actors and also motion cap actors have banded together against Activision, EA, WB Games, and other studios as well over the use of AI, trying to work out some sort of arrangements. And this is like a combination of roughly 2,600 voice actors and motion capture performers who are in the union. And the reason why is because there are concerns about these studios using AI, especially for like say use of their voices, their faces, and their bodies. And it's definitely concerning, and it's something, considering the fact that more companies are using AI in production, but now the idea of using it in entertainment as well is something that's going on there. And let me see, also going back into this article, seeing if there's anything else talking about. I know, and also apparently there actually was a strike that SAG-AFTRA had been doing last year in Hollywood. So this is, I guess you could say, sort of a continuation of that right now. And they're still going on trying to find make a deal and negotiate with these studios, but so far nothing has really come out as of yet. So yeah. Did you want to start off with your thoughts, or do you want me to
sure.
begin?
So I definitely see every reason why it is that these actors would be upset about the use of AI, because it is kind of, well, the biggest thing is it just takes away work from these people. And like, especially when they're using, voice act or AI generated voice acting for NPCs, for example. I mean, that's where a lot of people either earn their, bread and butter all across the board, but also in some cases it's just like this is ways to help get them between gigs, between like the bigger gigs, or to get them noticed so that they have a better chance, build up a repertoire so that they have a better chance of getting better jobs as they go along, and eventually maybe getting a big job that could be a big break that could potentially help them a lot of other ways. But I'm curious about how this is actually going to impact everything. I've been very skeptical of AI in general, not because I'm like worried about it being a Skynet kind of thing, like all the typical sci-fi tropes, where AI becomes self-aware and then wants to destroy humanity, so on and so forth. Like, I'm not concerned about anything like that, but I don't like when it takes away work from people. And yes, I understand, like, to a degree when it comes to the more repetitive tasks, and it's one thing, but for voice acting, while yes, I would definitely say that to some degree some of these people are just absolutely terrible people, and the AI might actually be able to do better than they can. I still don't like the idea of taking work away from people when it comes to things like that. I think that there's also just a lot of potential dangers with using AI, but I guess just I honestly, like, I'm in favor of. I think this strike is probably a good thing for these people who have worked hard, even the people that I don't like. And there are definitely some voice actors out there that I can't stand these people. I think they're terrible, horrible, no good, very bad people. But even with that being said, I don't think that their work should be taken away from them for that. Now, if their work's taken away for other reasons, like them just actually being terrible people and, intentionally doing stuff to ruin the lives of others and try to get them to self-delete in Minecraft, then yeah, those are those kind of people. I don't mind if they lose their jobs, but it's a whole different story when it's just that you're trying to save money, and so you do AI voice acting or AI motion capture. Well, I don't know exactly how that would work, but I'm sure that AI to some degree has the ability to study motion capture from previous things and make something that's at least reasonably convincing. So I think that's about where I stand. The TLDL is that I think that the voice actors and the motion capture actors, I think it's good that they're striking. I hope that they get something out of this.
Yeah, I'm pretty much in agreement with what you said, and it's actually very funny about what you mentioned about how a lot of voice actors just do in between gigs and like just do side stuff, because it's funny, just like some time ago I've been looking at a couple different voice actors, and I realized that in certain whether it was for shows or games, they just did some very small, like, uncredited work, but I was like, interesting, they actually did something. Normally they do something a little bit bigger, but they just did smaller work on like these projects, and I thought, it's like, oh, that's pretty interesting. I didn't know that they would have done something like that. But yeah, it definitely shows that there are people who sort of do need to do that stuff, even if it's not something you think it's large. It's sort of like you do need that to help make, whether it's a game or whether it's something, or it's like videos or like some sort of animation, you do need that to sort of like help build the immersion. So I do understand why that's a thing. So as you mentioned, also like people who are just trying to start out, get their feet wet, they need those types of jobs. So if you cut the way for them to build up their resume, then it's gonna be even harder for them to get into the industry as it is, considering the fact that they already would be competing against sort of like titans of their industry. That's just gonna make the barrier of entry much harder to get into.
Right.
But yeah, and I really, even with it cutting costs, I think that it's really scummy to do that, because it's one thing, for example, because I mean I've seen this on YouTube. If you're using AI for just like some sort of small fan project or something like that, or just like trying to do something like without just doing something for fun and something you're not trying to make some sort of profit off of. It's just like something you're doing for fun, posting on the internet, no big deal. It's just like something you did at the end of the day.
Yeah.
But these are companies that are doing it to make money. So you are essentially ripping people off, trying to save costs so you can boost your profits.
Yeah.
That's definitely a whole different ballpark altogether. And I can definitely see why people would not be pleased with that. And I mean, and I mean also for the likeness, that definitely, because I mean, like, for one thing, it's completely different as if you were saying, like, for example, a live action film where, say for example, you needed to replace an actor or actress because either they sadly passed away or they weren't available to do it, and you need to get someone who looked like them. Yeah. That's one thing altogether, because you're trying to get someone who looks like them to pick up from where the other person left off. Here, you're just pretty much completely ripping off their likeness and using it, which, I mean, maybe that's not too big of a thing. Maybe that's not too bad of a thing, since you are technically just continuing what happened there. But definitely the voice, I would say, is definitely a big problem there. So yeah, that's primarily where I stand on that as well. And I think as a whole, there are probably only a very small handful of things where I could say AI could be suitable for, but this definitely is not one of them.
Right. Now, I will say that the one situation where I would probably say that I would be okay more or less with AI over an actual voice actor would be in the case of if the voice actor is trying to insert modern day politics or whatever into a translation and they're intentionally tossing in stuff about Gamergate and whatever other Orange Man bad stuff, or even any sort of politics whatsoever. It's like they could be saying negative things about the politicians I despise the most, and I don't want them putting that in there if it's not already in there. It's one thing if you're translating something that's already that way and you're translating it faithfully, but if you're just inserting your garbage in there, I don't like that. Like, I remember there was so I remember watching the original anime version of Full Metal Alchemist, which was, of course, started while the manga was still running and finished before the manga finished. And so it took a completely different turn story-wise. I still actually really like that story, even though I think Brotherhood is better. But there was... I tried rewatching it at one point, and this was, I don't know, a number of years ago, because they had the whole series on Netflix, and there's this one point where I don't know who. I mean, obviously it was just whoever wrote the translation for it, because I don't believe for a second this was in the original Japanese. But there's that guy who made the what did you call it? The fusion, the guy who combined his daughter and the dog, that horrific monster.
Oh, the doctor. Oh, gosh,
yeah. So Um, what is it that they called those creatures?
Um, Homunculus.
Was it that? Because I mean, like, I know that the homunculus you had like
no,
wrath, envy, and so on and so forth. But gosh, I can't remember what those things are called. But anyway, that part aside, this is something that was before that even happened in the story. When his daughter was still fine, his dog was still fine before he did this horrific thing. And he's talking. He says this place could use a woman's touch. Oh man, that was sexist. It's like there's no way that was in the original Japanese. That's garbage. I mean, it was just like a throwaway line, and it wasn't as bad as like the kind of stuff that's been happening more recently with, particularly some of the same people who lied about Vic Mignogna to get him canceled and everything. But it's just like I'm not cool with that. Now, of course, realistically, I would rather. I mean, if it was a choice between the people who did that terrible translation versus AI, I would choose AI. But if I had a choice between doing the people who did the terrible insert translation stuff versus just getting a completely different person to do it, I'd rather have a different person do it. Because I'd rather people be able to get the work. But I also, it's like if it's this person or AI and there's no other option, I would choose AI over that person who's ruining the content that they're putting out. I mean, I've always been more of a dub guy over subs, even though I like subs just fine. I'm perfectly fine reading. I usually have subtitles on anyway, even when I'm watching something that is not translated, that isn't a dub. But there comes a certain point when it's just like, I'm not cool with that. So anyway.
Yeah, and that actually is a good point that you mentioned. That was one of the thoughts that I actually had, but sort of like slightly different, and that was more so using AI, not for the voice actors and actresses, but for the translation itself. Because that definitely, in fact, there was actually something that had caused translators to go out have a fit, because I can't remember what anime it was, but they had used AI to translate it, and it had been closer to the original Japanese script. And even though there were little hiccups here and there with the translation, overall it was still close to the original meaning. And that just had the translators, or I guess as they call themselves, localizers, because they're not really translating work, up in to be ring, because they're like, no, you're not doing it right. That's supposed to be our job. It's like, well, you weren't doing your job in the first place. So
it's like if you're doing your job, it's fine. If you're doing your job, then yes, you should keep your job. But if you are intentionally mistranslating so that you can insert your own nonsense beliefs that have absolutely nothing to do with the story that's present, that's garbage. I would rather AI do it than that, because at least it's going to be an accurate translation. You may still have to fiddle with the language a little bit to make it flow better, or also to make it work well with the lip movements, because I understand that that's part of it as well. But it's a whole different story when you are intentionally just inserting your garbage that has absolutely nothing to do with what the story was actually telling. And I'm not even really an anime guy anymore. Like I haven't really been an anime guy in 20 years. I mean, if I'm being real, it's like I cared about it when I was in high school, and after that I completely stopped following it. And like on rare occasions I've gone back and watched something, like getting all of Dragon Ball Z on Blu-ray, watching through Dragon Ball Super, for nostalgia, and because I hadn't seen Super and I was like, okay, I want to watch this. But in general, I just like I stopped trying to follow any of that stuff because I could never keep up with it. And my wife wasn't really into that. I tried getting her into a couple things. She watched a decent chunk of Dragon Ball Z, but like never. I tried getting her into Gundam Wing. She wasn't really getting into it. And I can't remember if there was anything else that I really tried with her. I kind of just gave up. And I mean, the reality is like I had pretty much stopped watching it myself, so I also didn't care as much anymore. And it just, I don't know. Anyway. going way off on a tangent.
One last thing I actually do want to say, because it was bugging me as well, so I had to look at this up. The doctor's name was Sho Tucker, and he was making chimeras. That's what it was.
That's what it was. Chimeras. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes. Chimeras.
Yeah, that was bugging me too, as I was like, I gotta look this up now.
Right. Oh yeah, and of course, that was one of the. I mean, like, of course, with Full Metal Alchemist, I had no idea who Vic Mignogna was when I watched that. Didn't know who he was at all until the whole thing came up with him in 2019. Before that, like, I had no idea who the guy was at all. Even though I had heard him in a couple things, because it was like, okay, Full Metal Alchemist, yep, heard him there, and him playing Junpei in the original versions of Persona 3. It's like, okay, yeah, heard him in both of those, but beyond that, like, I had no idea who the guy was. So, yeah, but he did a killer job as Edward Elric.
Oh, definitely.
He was perfect in that role. So, I mean, he was great as Junpei as well. I'm sure that there's some other role. Like, I never saw any of the Brawly stuff, so I've never heard him as Brawly. But anyway. Getting back on topic. Okay, so let's go ahead and get into our next topic, unless you have any other thoughts on that.
No, sir.
All right, well, I think we should just go ahead and get our other negative topic out of the way. And I think that this one is, of course, more relevant to me as a big fan of Destiny, wearing my Destiny hoodie, which is one of my favorites, and using my Bungie mug, more just because it's the one I happened to be using before the story came up. So Bungie just announced a new slew of layoffs, and some significant ones. So they are, let me just bring up specifically what we have here. So it's about 17% of their workforce is being laid off. So 220 people. And they're going to be, separately, they're going to be integrating 155 people into Sony Interactive Entertainment over the next few quarters. Basically, the long and short of this is that Bungie has said that there's just been a lot of budgetary issues, that sort of thing, and they're just having to make some major downsizes. Now, how much of this is specifically having to do with Sony, because Sony does own Bungie now, and how much of it is Bungie themselves is something we don't know with absolute certainty. I definitely have my opinions, and I will be sharing those after you have a chance to talk. But something I do want to note with this, or a couple more things with this. First of all, I do want to note that everyone affected by this job reduction will be receiving a generous exit package, according to the CEO of Bungie, Pete Parsons, including severance, bonus, and health coverage. So at least they're doing that. That is a good thing. But then I also want to note that it was recently found out that the CEO of Bungie apparently spent about $2.3 million on classic cars after Sony acquired them. So spent over $2 million on cars. You could get like a Lamborghini, like a fancy schmancy one, maybe $250,000, like a brand new one. I mean, I'm not sure actually what the prices are nowadays. I know that like back in the days when I would, watch Top Gear, the UK version, back when that was heavily going, I want to say it was like the most expensive ones, with the exception of like the Bugatti Veyron, which was like, I think that thing could hit 500 miles an hour or something. It was insane like that. Maybe I'm remembering wrong, but I want to say that there was probably something like that was like $500,000, but that was like a super duper, incredibly fast and understandably expensive, even though it's way beyond what any normal person would ever spend, unless they just had a ton of money. But $2 million, over $2 million on classic cars. Okay, I will get into my thoughts after you have a chance to talk. So,
All right. So the only good thing I can say is that the laid off employees are getting benefits. That's the only good thing I can say here, because everything else is just it's just baffling. Because how are you laying off this many people? And granted, as was stated, there are the employees who are being transferred over to SIE, so not everyone's out of a job right now, but it really is concerning the fact that so many, 17% of the company was just let go.
yeah.
And the thing is, this happened before Bungie laid off people earlier this year. I believe we talked about this. So, and it also goes back to something we said before: is what's going on with the company? What is management doing that they are having this much problems? And I'm even wondering, at what point is Sony going to step in? Because I feel like Bungie has just, I mean, granted, Sony said that they were really concerned about the profits brought in and that Bungie had to meet a certain threshold. And, maybe with the recent Destiny expansion, maybe that is, helping them tread water. But I still feel like they need to be very careful, because I know that Sony's supposed to step in and completely, take the reins if Bungie does not meet that threshold or of requirements. So I almost feel like even with this layoff, I'm wondering if Sony is still wondering if they should step in, because it definitely seems that way. The fact that they're having these issues, and the funny thing too is the fact that Sony went to Bungie first to, with the Last of Us 2 Factions multiplayer to get advice from them, and Bungie said, "Oh yeah, you can't do this. It's not gonna work out for you." And yet they're the ones having problems. It's just, I don't know. I don't know what's going on with them. I mean, and then on top of it, the CEO allegedly spending $2.3 million on cars, and it just, sure, that's possibly money that he has that is saved up, but I don't think maybe that's entirely. I mean, maybe he got some of that through, maybe selling some of his shares in the company. I don't know how he got that much money, to use right off the bat, but it just doesn't, that's just not a good look. I gotta be honest here. One way or another, it just does not look good. The fact that it's like, yeah, I'm buying all these cars, but my company is going up in flames. Like, what type of precedent does that set for everyone? Like, that does not look good even for the morale. And I mean, the employees who are still there working, what are they thinking? Like, a lot of our buddies were just let go, but what's gonna happen to us now? Like, when is it gonna be our turn on the chopping block? And I mean, the company also had problems, because we discussed this before, how with the security, how they laid off so many people who are working on, keeping the game secure between cheaters and stuff like that, and how there was only like a handful of people working on that, and yeah, it's just such a big mess that I don't know. I really feel like at this point Sony should intervene, because even though there are people who have been transferred, like I said, Bungie just is not where they should be. They're not doing what they should be doing. And I think a lot of this has to deal with the management. It's because they're the ones who are messing up the problem. Whatever the decisions they're making is what's affecting everything else. So if leadership is not doing its thing, then how is everyone else supposed to, set things right? So I really think that Sony actually should step in and fully, take the reins and kick out the CEO and anyone else who is doing such an incompetent job. That's all I gotta say.
All right. Well, where do I start? First of all, actually, I do want to mention, because I forgot to mention it before, Something that Bungie did mention in the announcement of this is that they're only going to be focusing on Destiny and Marathon going forward. Of course, Marathon has not launched yet. We know it's supposed to be coming out, I believe, sometime next year. And of course, Destiny has been going now for almost 10 years, including Destiny 1. And of course, with Lightfall last year, that really hurt them a lot financially because it just didn't do well for a variety of reasons. The current expansion, the Final Shape, everyone has been saying is potentially the best expansion they've ever done, which is saying a lot because when you compare, I mean the fact that Destiny has had the Taken King in Destiny 1 and has had, for some reason I'm blanking off, Forsaken in Destiny 2, the Witch Queen in Destiny 2, all incredible expansions. Some of the best stuff they've ever put out, and the Final Shape is beating it from that standpoint because it is that good. And although I haven't played a lot of it, everything I played, it's like, okay, this is incredible. And like I still barely even touched the new subclass. So I am a big fan of Destiny. I very much like, I think Bungie as a developer in terms of the quality of their games overall is excellent. I think that they are second to none when it comes to how the guns feel to shoot in these games, without question. I mean, it's one of the things that spoiled me for so long that I had a hard time playing anything on PC while I was waiting for, before Destiny came over, because of course Destiny 1 was just on Xbox and PlayStation. And even though of course it was only 30 frames per second there, which was hard to go back to, the guns felt so good that it ruined other games for me. You know, the guns and the movement and supers and all that combination of stuff felt incredible. That being said, I've been really gracious in the past with Bungie in terms of the layoffs and everything, just saying, okay, you know, being understanding. This time I'm not. Now, I will say right now, this isn't going to make me necessarily stop playing Destiny. I mean, I don't play a lot anyway anymore, even though like I do want to get back into it because I do want to reward the quality of work that they put in. Plus, of course, with all I've invested, I at least want to see the story through to the end of this saga. Not even sure if I'm even going to bother with any of the stuff that's coming after the main Light and Darkness saga that's been going over the past 10 years. But I really am just not... I'm not cool with this because there were rumors in the past that Bungie had issues with how they handle money. And that was a big part of why they ended up getting to the point where they had to get Sony to buy them. They've just had issues with money over the years. And I tried to be as charitable as I could in terms of how they handle things. But right now, it's very clear that they have a big problem with money. And I'm not going to pretend that like I'm the best with money, because I know I'm not. I know that I definitely spend more money on stuff that I should, on extra stuff, that sort of thing. But when it comes to running a company, you need to make sure that you have your priorities straight. And I know that they do a lot of bonus stuff for their employees and all this other, you know, like optional kind of benefits and programs and classes and things like that. And it's like, okay, that's good in theory, but the problem is if you're not making sure that your highest priority is to take care of your employees in terms of their employment and being able to pay the bills so that people can do their stuff, the extra stuff, you should not even be doing it. Or you should do it a lot more minimal. It's like, you know, you could do the basic benefits, you know, healthcare, you know, bonuses, so on and so forth, you know, paid time off, all that kind of stuff. It's like, okay, yeah, that stuff important. Do those things. Get rid of all the extraneous stuff. Make sure that the CEO, instead of giving him a massive bonus when they get bought out or however it is he got his $2.3 million that he spent on cars, assuming that's true, which it may not be, but I'm more inclined to believe it's true based on what we're seeing here with Bungie, the pattern we've been seeing with them. The fact of the matter is that I want Sony to just take over at this point. I think that Bungie is very poorly managed, and I think that they need to do something different. Usually, like, I'm very understanding when it comes to all these different layoffs because these things happen. But the fact that this is such a significant layoff more than once this year. It's like it hasn't even been 6 months since the last time they did those major layoffs. I mean, unless I'm remembering incorrectly, but I'm almost positive that the layoffs started. I mean, the last time we were talking about layoffs was like back in January. I'm almost positive that's when it was. And, maybe I'll have to look at that again. But the fact of the matter is the fact that this is happening again so soon, even after the launch, the very successful launch that they've had with Final Shape. The fact that players are energized, they're loving the current state of Destiny and everything, and they're having these problems. They're having these problems because they've mismanaged their funds. And I mean, they said in that announcement post that there was a point when they were basically running in the red. And like, I get it, that happens sometimes, but it's a whole different story when the reason you're running in the red is because of the fact that you're not taking care of your employees. You're focused more on making sure that your CEO has this extra money. It's like, give the CEO a pay cut, give some of the higher ups pay cuts, take care of your employees, voluntarily do those things. Be like Iwata. That's what you need to be doing. I mean, this is not the first time that we've had to say this because, of course, we had the same thing with like Epic Games doing all their layoffs. And, of course, Microsoft's done a bunch of layoffs. And I wasn't that harsh with Microsoft because Microsoft, it's like, okay, they hired a bunch of people. I mean, they had an insane number of people that they hired. They had to lay people off. Bungie is different because Bungie is not the size of Microsoft. Yes, of course, I think Microsoft actually laid off considerably more people, but Microsoft's also significantly larger than Bungie. Bungie is a little tiny studio compared to Microsoft. And the fact that this is happening so significantly, I mean, you look at the total number of people that they're either laying off or moving over to Sony Interactive Entertainment, you have 29%, almost 30% of their staff is essentially being taken out of working on these games and being moved over. Now, yes, they have said with this 12%, these 155 people who are being moved over to SIE, that they're going to be part of a new studio, they're going to be working on a new game. That's great. That's wonderful. But it's still the fact that this shouldn't even be happening. Now, it'd be one thing if all they were doing was moving people over. Then I'd be like, okay, that's no problem. No big deal. I'm sure that these people are happy, to be able to go work on something new. Especially because I'm sure at least to some degree, even if they love Destiny, they wouldn't mind doing something different. Besides Destiny, Marathon, these other projects that seem to have been canceled. I think that Bungie has been just so poorly managed, and it's very clear that there's some significant problems. I think that they need to get rid of the CEO, and I would say whoever their CFO is, he needs to go too, because the fact that these things are happening, I mean, unless this is all Sony making these calls, which maybe, but I find it hard to believe based on Bungie's track record. I think that their CFO needs to go as well, because if he is allowing things to have gone the direction that they've been going, instead of actually making the effort to say, hey, we need to change these things because right now we're not doing well. Right now we're spending extra money on all this extra stuff that we don't need to be spending money on. We should be trying to reduce costs instead of spending it on all this extraneous stuff that doesn't matter as much as taking care of our employees. That needs to be your first priority when it comes to making these games. And I don't know. I'm not sure if I have anything else to say. I think I'm just going to be repeating myself over and over, but the TLDL of that is that I'm not happy about this. I think that Bungie needs some serious changes, and I'm not going to be as gracious with them as I was in the past.
I definitely agree, and I guess it's just a matter of time, and we'll see what happens with Sony deciding if enough is enough, or if they'll still give them a little more grace or not.
Yeah. And as always, I do hope that the people who are being let go are able to land on their feet, go do something else, work for another company, and get to keep doing what they love. Regardless of, what they believe, what their politics are, I don't care about any of that. I just want them to be able to do what they love, to get paid doing it. I mean, because, how many of us would love to be able to work on video games? I mean, those of us who love video games, we would love to be able to do that kind of stuff. Have a dream job doing something that you love doing, and then you get let go because management does such a piss poor job of handling their finances. And, yeah. I don't know. Sony, take over, please. And please steer the ship correctly. I know everybody's in bad shape across the board in general, but Bungie, to me, this just shows major incompetence and just extremely poor management. So, anyway. Any other thoughts on that?
No, sir.
All right, so let's start getting into some of the positive topics here. Why don't you start us off with this thing from Suda51 and Shinji Mikami?
All right, yeah. So, oops, make sure I have that up here right. Right. So, oops, that's the wrong thing. Let me get this right at this time.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah. So, Suda51 and Shinji Mikami. So they recently said at a presentation for Grasshopper Direct, which is what Suda51's company, and he also did. He worked on the No More Heroes games. That was primarily what he did. But he also worked on a game called Killer 7, which was a game that was on the Gamecube and PS2 way back in the day. And at the end of the presentation, they said that, specifically Mikami, he said he would like to see the return of Killer 7, which he co-wrote with Suda51. And I mean, here's the exact quotes that said, "I've realized that," this Mikami speaking, "I've realized that I want to stay as hands-on as possible when it comes to game creation. I'd love to see Suda make a sequel to Killer 7. And Suda replies saying, "Seriously? Someday we may just see a Killer 7 sequel, or a complete collection." And Mikami also said, "What matters most is whether or not you want to make it." And to which Suda replied, "I'd rather make a complete collection first, and then Killer 11. Mikami then asked if the sequel would indeed be called Killer 11, to which Suda clarified, "I don't know. Killer 7. Something probably, maybe Killer 7 Beyond." And and so that's possibly what happened. And then of course they added saying that fans would probably love a complete collection, and that would be doable. But then Suda, concluded saying, "We've had to decide which comes first, Killer 7 Beyond or the complete edition." So that definitely was interesting. I don't know if I should wait and share my opinions, or let you go on that.
Well, I will go first. So, Killer 7 is not a game I ever got a chance to play. Definitely more interested in it because I love the No More Heroes games. I actually have physical copies of all 4 on the Switch. I did not, even though I played 1 and 2 both on the Wii, I did not get physical copies. I never got the PS3 version. And I have not yet bought any of them on PC, even though eventually I want to, both for comparisons and just because they're great games. 3 is... I didn't like 3 as much. Travis Strikes Again was definitely the weakest of them all. It was kind of fun. It was a lot more repetitive. 3 just had a whole lot of other issues that I didn't like as much. Personally, 1 and 2 are my favorites. 1, I think, is my favorite overall. 2, I didn't like as much the first time I played it, but I enjoyed it a lot more the second time I played it. But either way, they're just really, really fantastic games. I think 1's my favorite. But because of how much I enjoy these games, I would very happily buy Killer 7. Assuming they did a complete edition. And I think there's no reason to believe that they wouldn't, because, Suda did that, bringing the No More Heroes games over to the Switch and everything, and, well, Switch and other platforms, but I'm pretty sure all the games are on every platform now. I know all of them are on PC, and I know that at least No More Heroes 3 is everywhere. I'm pretty sure Traffic Strikes Again is as well. So I would imagine probably all of them are on all platforms now. But yeah, they're fantastic games. And I actually am kind of curious, though, about the PC version of No More Heroes 3, because the Switch version, the biggest problem was, of course, just the performance was atrocious. Well, the visuals and performance outside of battles were atrocious. And so I'd be curious about how that is. Otherwise, I just thought the open world in general I didn't like as much as the first game. But yeah, I'm very interested in this. I hope that it happens, because I've never played them. I've never played Killer 7, but I would very much be interested. Oh my gosh. Something that I didn't realize. So this is one of the lines from that article. Originally released for the GameCube and PS2 in 2005, the stylish, violent action game centers on Harmon Smith, a wheelchair-bound assassin with 7 split personalities, which he can make real. I just came up with a great idea for the cover art. Oh my goodness. Okay. Anyway, go ahead, take it away.
Yeah, okay, I actually do want to sort of circle back to that point. It wasn't until I actually played the game that I realized what his name was from. Like, I thought that was just his actual in real life name, and then I realized until I actually played Killer 7, I was like, oh, that's why he's called Harmon Smith.
Are you sure his name isn't really Harmon Smith?
I thought his name was Harmon Smith. When I first heard about him, I thought his name was Harmon Smith, and then also like his profile picture I thought was Harmon Smith from the game as well.
Oh, okay. I did not realize that.
Yeah, it wasn't until
I just assumed that was his actual name too, because it sounded like, okay, it sounds like a real name,
Yeah. And
okay.
I was like, the crazy thing is too is I don't think I even really remember him even ever talking about Killer 7, which is odd too to me. But yeah. Going back to the original topic. So, as I mentioned, I did play a little bit of Killer 7 on the PC, and actually primarily I played it on my Switch, and so far from what I played, it ran pretty well.
It's on Switch?
I'm so sorry, not Switch. I meant to say Steam Deck. Steam Deck.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I played.
I'm assuming that's the GameCube emulation or PS2 emulation.
No, it's the Steam version.
Oh, I didn't even realize there was a Steam version. Well, I'm gonna have to. I might actually even have it in my wish list now that I think about it. But yeah, go ahead, keep going.
But I played it, and it definitely ran well. The gameplay is a bit odd, just because the fact that you play it, you're in the third person, and I'm pretty certain it's fixed camera, or at least the camera is limited as far as how you can move it. But in order to actually engage in combat and shoot, you switch to a first-person perspective, and you have to target the weak spots of enemies, and you have to do it before they get close enough to you or they explode, which deals damage to you. Now, granted, if things change later on through the game, like I said, I haven't gotten that far into the game, so I don't know how that's handling. But it definitely is interesting because each of the different assassins, their weapons are unique and how they, control differs. So that definitely made things interesting, especially if you're playing for someone who has a sniper rifle, then you have someone who has a bazooka, then you have someone who has a revolver, and it definitely was interesting. And I mean, the interactions with the characters in the world, like there's also this weird guy who goes around, and he appears around he primarily appears around the save points, which are like these TVs, and he speaks in such a weird jumbled way that isn't even a real language, but it's just so weird. And he just also is always whispering, or at least his face isn't a whisper, and he's always hunched over like this, but he's talking to you, and it's just I really don't know how to explain it. So like the game is definitely unique in what it did. But because I haven't gone too far in the game, I don't know how it necessarily ends. So I don't know if there's something that happens which would, if it was like on a cliffhanger, or if there was something that was left open for a sequel. And the fact that they said Killer 11 makes me think, did something happen that includes 4 more assassins, or is this completely different person altogether? It definitely was just it definitely was very interesting hearing that or reading that about the Killer 11. So I'm like, now I want to go back and actually finish the game, because I'm very curious. Also, just because of the fact that I heard the game's not that long, so it definitely should be. I definitely should be able to just finish it. And yeah, I just need to go back and finish that game. But yeah. I am curious about that, about a sequel. I do think that maybe this complete edition, which, to be honest, I don't really know why it would be called a complete edition, because I don't think there was anything that was. Oh, I see it. Remember, he was saying that there was possibly more dialogue and stuff. So I feel like maybe a complete edition is likely, possibly, just because of the fact that it would probably be something that's easier to do, especially if just you essentially have the original game. Maybe you'll touch up some stuff here and there, but I don't think it's something that's going to be a complete remake, but maybe it's a remaster with the new dialogue added in there. So I feel like that's something that would be a more likely thing to at least come first, and then maybe the sequel comes later on. But it's definitely something I'll probably keep my eye on.
Just out of curiosity, I did check and see, and you're right, Harmon Smith does in fact have a Killer 7 profile pic. Because I had only ever seen a zoomed out thing, because I never really looked that closely at his, and I always just thought it was the typical thing where someone will do a Chad looking picture of themselves, like a drawn Chad looking picture to make them look more masculine and everything else, and they actually are. And no, it's in fact the character from Killer 7. And I noticed, with the link in his thing, because he of course will promote whatever books he's written. Cody Lee is his actual name. That's the name of his author page. So that changes things for sure. But no, in all seriousness, I, of course, knowing that this is on Steam, I think I knew that a while ago, and just for some reason I forgot that I had seen that before. But I'd probably check it out on Steam first. Knowing that, I mean, of course, I just added it to my wish list, watching out for a sale, because I don't need it right now by any stretch. But yeah, that definitely makes me more interested in checking it out. And of course, like I said, I'm a big fan of the No More Heroes games, so I would very much like to see how this game is, for sure. Yeah. I don't really know what else to say on that front, but I definitely have good ideas for the thumbnail for this week. So maybe I'll title the episode something like Harmon 7. I don't know. Anyway, going back to the news, that's really all I have in terms of thoughts on that. Do you have any other thoughts on it?
No, sir.
All right. So something else that came up. So San Diego Comic-Con, there was a display there. And let me see if I can actually find the original thing here. So there was some logos that were found in a display at San Diego Comic-Con for an unannounced games, a set of games that were originally on PlayStation 1 and Dreamcast. Legacy of Kain, Soul Reaver 1 and 2 remastered. Once again, these have never been announced, and Legacy of Soul Reaver 1 has been delisted from everywhere. You can't buy it anywhere. You might still be able to buy the PlayStation 1 Classics version on PS3, but you can't. I know you can't buy it on Vita, and you can't buy it on Steam or GOG or anything like that. You can get the rest of the Legacy of Kain games, and I actually got those all on discount on GOG, but the first game is just not available. So the only way to play it currently is either to Yo-Ho-Ho or to Yo-Ho-Ho in a different way and emulating it. So I was actually going to try to record some footage from the Dreamcast emulation that I had on my Steam Deck, but I think I must not have the Dreamcast emulator installed anymore, or it's just not pointing to the right location because it wasn't booting up for me. So, but anyway, your thoughts?
Yeah, it's definitely interesting that's there, and I mean, I feel like there's no reason why that thing should exist in the first place, or at least that mention shouldn't exist if it's not going to happen. Something like that just doesn't haphazardly appear. It's you don't just say, "Hey, here's a remaster of a game," and just like slight subtle hint here, but like nothing's happening. You don't just do that. So I feel like this is something that could be happening. I'm definitely interested in it, but we'll definitely see. Now, I never played any of the Soul Reaver games or Legacy of Kain games, and although I think I have them on GOG, I think I might have bought them at some point. Yeah, I did. I actually pulled up here. I do have Legacy of Kain 2 and Defiance and Blood Omen, but I haven't touched them yet. But I have heard that they are good games from what I've heard. So I feel like I should at some point go back and play them, but I am interested in seeing if they are doing like full remasters, then maybe I wouldn't even touch those games and just like wait for the actual full remaster and play that instead. So yeah, I mean I'm definitely interested in it. I would like to see that happen. And one thing that I didn't even notice until know about until reading the article was that Amy Hennig wrote the stories for the game. So I was like, that's very interesting. Just more stuff that she did that really helped, and it's kind of a shame what happened with her Naughty Dog because she did a lot of the work there. Yeah, but hey, we'll empower women, but when it actually counts, you get rid of them. But hey,
right. All right. Well, first of all, I will say, I mean, this is all but confirmed. Like, it's not actually, there isn't any official confirmation per se. Although, well, it's a little confusing because the VGC article. Let me find it. Where was it? I think I have to go back. So, find it here. So there is a graphic novel prequel that was recently announced by Dark Horse Comics, and that is due to release in early August. So very soon, actually, by the time this comes out, it may already be out. Either that or probably be the following week. But then I should specifically mentioning where they saw this. So at San Diego Comic-Con, there was a display that had some statues of Raziel and I can't remember the name of the vampire guy. I don't know if remember that's actually Kane or if that's something else. But anyway, once again, I haven't played these games, so forgive me for anybody listening. I don't remember the names of the characters. I vaguely remember from the tiny bit I played of the first game. But anyway, so there's statues of them, and underneath them, for the Dark Horse comics, there is a display that says Legacy of Kain, Soul Reaver 1 and 2 Remastered. And has a little QR code for Dark Horse comics, which I might actually have just scanned that QR code, but I'm pretty sure that's just for the comic itself and not for anything else. But it does, mention it does show in the picture Crystal Dynamics listed there as well, which of course is original developer for the games. Now, this is a game series I've been interested in for a very long time, probably 20 some odd years. It's probably 2000 that I first heard about this game. I remember specifically that my cousin, who at the time was staying with us at our house, he was living with us for 6 months to a year, something like that. I watched him play Soul Reaver 1 on the PS1. I mean, I only watched him play a little bit of it, but I remember how it just grabbed my attention. Like, wow, this game looks great. And I always wanted to play it. I finally got it as a PS1 classic, and played a tiny bit on my Vita, but I didn't play very much. And it was mostly just because of the fact that I think at the time I didn't have headphones with me and I was at work. So I was trying to play it during my lunch break, but it's like I couldn't hear anything. And so it was kind of making it hard for me to play. Fast forward, eventually, when I get my Steam Deck, I decide, okay, I want to try emulating this game and see how it goes. And I decided to emulate the Dreamcast version because I figured that's probably going to be better looking, performing, and all that anyway. Even though realistically with DuckStation, PS1 version might be just fine. But I didn't play much. I basically just tested it out. Worked great once I fiddled with settings a little bit to have good camera controls with the right stick and all that. But it's just one that I just haven't gotten to. Now, I'm very excited about this collection, particularly because a remaster theoretically should be really good. Should look really great. They may update the visuals completely too. I would hope that they would, but even if they didn't do a full overhaul of the visuals and they didn't add new textures and everything else, I would still be excited about it because it's a game I want to play. It's Metroidvania, so 3D Metroidvania. Of course, Amy Hennig is a fantastic writer, so that further cements my interest in this game. But knowing that there's a remaster coming, it's probably going to be a day one purchase for me. I would say more likely than not, as long as the price isn't outrageous. But I imagine that unless it's just a complete graphical overhaul, that it's probably not going to be ridiculous. I'm guessing around $50 is probably what they're going to charge for this collection. And something that I want to do with it that I think would be really interesting is doing a comparison of how the game looks with the remaster versus emulation with either with DuckStation for PS1 version or whatever the Dreamcast emulator is that I don't remember the name of it. Because I'd be curious about which one looks and runs better. Now, of course, if they update the visuals, then very clearly it's going to look better from that standpoint. But then I also think about what Konami did with Metal Gear Solid 1, where they kept the PS1 visuals with no updates whatsoever, still 4:3 resolution, still 30 FPS, and while I don't think Crystal Dynamics and whoever specifically is paying for this remaster is going to go that bare bones because they're not as bad as Konami, if they did, then that would be much more interesting to see. Either way, I'm excited about this. I very much want to play these games. and it will more likely than not, as long as it doesn't just come at a terrible time, it will be a day one purchase for me.
Yeah, definitely. And I at first, for some reason I was thinking that it was Crystal Dynamics did another remaster recently, and I was like, oh, is that them? I realized no, it was what were they called? Night Dive Studios, who were doing remasters of other games.
Right.
But I definitely would be interested in seeing what they do here, because didn't Crystal Dynamics also do the Tomb Raider remasters? Okay.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they did the remasters for that. I'm not positive if it was them or not. I know that they were behind the early Tomb Raider games. I can't remember if they specifically did the remasters or someone else did.
Okay, yeah. And from what I remember, because granted, I have the remasters collection, but I barely touched that. But from what I've heard, the remasters were pretty much, I mean, except for like maybe like a couple things that were censored, they were pretty much very faithful to the original games, and the fact that you could also toggle between the original graphics and the new remastered textures, and also change the controls as well. So if they do the same thing similar with Legacy of Kain, I think that would be a pretty good addition to have, where you can actually toggle back and forth for those who want the newer controls or newer graphics,
right?
And or go back to the original settings as well. I think having that would be pretty good if they did that here as well. So that definitely would make it worthwhile to do. But yeah, definitely would be good to keep an eye out on that.
Yeah, I mean, the little bit that I played, I remember the only issue I remember having with the controls was the camera, but that was pretty easily fixable, because even doing it on the Vita with the emulation there, I could set it up so that you could rotate the camera with the right stick. It was pretty easy to set up. So I think from that standpoint, it probably wouldn't be as bad. Like, because of course Tomb Raider, I'm pretty sure originally had tank controls, and so of course that was much more dramatic of a thing. With this, it wouldn't be quite as dramatic necessarily, other than the fact that you'd be able to fix the camera. And they might potentially make it so that other aspects of the controls are a little different. I'm not entirely sure, because once again, I barely played the game, and it's been probably at least 2 or 3 years since I really actually spent some time trying it out. So, but either way, should be sweet. All right. Any remaining thoughts on that, or do you want to move on to the next topic?
No, I'm good to move on.
All right, so Xbox has had some interesting changes with the way things have been going for them. So, of course, as we know, their console sales are way down. We knew that was the case. It's been an issue for a long time. But what's interesting is that despite having lower console sales, their profits have gone up by 61% since they bought Activision Blizzard. So now that's of course in some ways to be expected, because Blizzard includes King, which is a mobile developer, Candy Crush, huge moneymaker. Then of course they have Diablo Immortal, which is a massive mobile game that also has a ton of microtransactions, all that stuff. But there's let me just see if I can find the specific things here. I just want to make sure I'm giving this information correctly. So let me just go ahead and read what's here from Windows Central. Okay, so kind of a summary from what Windows Central says. Yesterday, Microsoft reported its quarterly earnings for the company, marking another strong quarter for the firm. For gaming specifically, Xbox grew by 61%, largely driven by Activision Blizzard and services. This offset a hefty 42% decline year over year in Xbox hardware revenue. In relation to this, Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella described Xbox's forward-looking strategy focusing on console first, PC second, and then also mobile, which of course includes cloud cloud streaming as well as mobile games like Diablo Immortal, like Candy Crush, etc. So, see, just make sure I'm not missing anything else here. The gaming audience that they have now with this acquisition is up to 500 million people. Now, that's not saying that this is all Xbox people specifically using Xbox. This is including Activision, Blizzard, all the stuff related to that. My guess is that since they didn't really specify here, probably this 500 million is the potential people playing it versus, with consoles, it's a much smaller market. But once you include the mobile, the cloud gaming, all of that, that increases the number to 500 million, at least potential monthly active users. But I mean, they say that it is. Let me just read this. Microsoft emphasized that its gaming audience has ballooned to an absurd 500 million monthly active users, making one of the biggest gaming platforms in history. Now, as I said before, I don't know for sure if this is saying these are actual people who are actively gaming, or if it's saying these are potential customers because there's this many people overall, including mobile gamers, who play mobile games in general. Not that they play specifically games that are published by Microsoft that are Activision, Blizzard, King, or King titles. So, anyway, take it away.
Yeah. So it definitely, I definitely will say that Activision really, really did a lot of the heavy lifting here,
Right.
because I mean, the article mentioned that Xbox would have only grown by 4%, which I mean is better than having a decline. They relatively were pretty much flat over the past year or past quarter. However, this is looking at things. So and that's definitely also with regards compared with how their consoles completely declined sharply. That definitely offsets things, I'd say, quite well. It kind of really balances things out and to a degree, because even if people aren't buying their consoles as much, there are still people who are using their programs, using their game, playing their games, using their services, so that definitely helps out with that in that aspect. Now, one thing that I was interested in, and this is something that will definitely be for the future, is how their new changes with cutting out the current standard tier of Xbox Game Pass will impact things, just because the fiscal year ended on, I believe it was June 25th or June 30th, I think.
Should be June 30th.
Yeah, June 30th. And how the announcement of them cutting that one tier only happens within this month. So that's something we won't know until the future, is if how many people will drop Xbox as a result, or or at least drop Game Pass, or might not care to get into Game Pass because they won't have a chance to actually get a tier that they really want to buy. So I'm curious to know how that will impact things in the future. But at least as far as what they've done so far, it definitely has been a positive for them. Again, Activision really was doing a lot of the heavy lifting here. But I guess the one thing though is the fact that even though they said they are focusing it on the least, what things will look like with mobile, or at least with digital, because of the fact that more people are using, who are active users, are most likely using it from a non-Xbox account, or a non-Xbox, or maybe not even on a PC, because they might be streaming it to, say, their phone or tablet or something like that. And even with the new thing they have with Amazon, with the Fire Stick, is that going to impact things as well? Are more people going to be switching over to that, and will that impact, how many people are playing on a console versus how many people are playing on some other device? That's gonna be interesting, and also knowing sort of like, I guess, also seeing how's that going to impact what they do with their consoles moving forward. Even though they still say consoles are their first and primary target audience, could they shift things? Because I mean, sure, it's relatively too soon to say something, but depending on how the trends go, they might, just decide, maybe we want to redirect some of our efforts towards this audience instead. I mean, I'm not saying they're going to abandon Xbox console, but they still might, I mean, it might even, maybe their next console, they might primarily be focusing on a digital Xbox instead of a one with a disc drive. Who knows? I mean, they could probably just make them completely digital next generation. Not that I'm saying want them to, but that could be something they focus on.
Yeah, and I think that there's definitely potential for that, especially since you just revealed the all digital 2 terabyte Xbox that's coming out. I don't think it's out yet. I can't remember if it's already out or if it's just coming out later this year. But hopefully, even if they do that, they would at least have the option of an external disk drive, like what PlayStation has done with their new version, with their Slims. So, I don't know, from that standpoint. In terms of the actual overall strategy here, it's pretty obvious that, at least from what Satya Nadella is saying, their intention is just to basically have the software side of things hold up the hardware. And that the only real reason why they're even able to keep putting out Xbox as a console, and why they at least intend to continue to make that their higher priority, is because of the fact that they have all this software to, the software, the Game Pass subscriptions, the streaming services, all of that, that can pick up a lot of the weight, pick up a lot of the slack. And of course, obviously, with all the mobile gaming, I mean, it's so unbelievably profitable that they probably could use a lot of the money that they make from that and microtransactions in general to help make up for wherever the Xbox itself is failing. And does that necessarily mean it's going to be a long-term, they're going to do it forever? I don't know about that, but I think that to some degree, consoles are eventually going to die out anyway. I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon. Right now, consoles are still a more affordable option for most people. Most people would rather spend less on the front end and get something that's simpler to use. Even though, obviously, consoles have certainly gotten more complicated than they used to be. But at least, right now, consoles aren't going anywhere. And the Xbox, I mean, it's so hard to say what's going to happen. Obviously, the main thing, at least to me, it's obvious, is that how long Xbox is going to last as a console manufacturer is going to depend a lot on how much they can sell Game Pass to people, how much they can sell. I mean, whether it's specifically using Game Pass, like through PC, through the Xbox console, through phones, through xCloud, streaming services in general, all of that. If they can sell enough of that, they can hold up the Xbox console and all that. I mean, because the reality is that most of the money that they're making is not off of their consoles anyway. And that's really true pretty much across the board with all console manufacturers. They lose money typically on their consoles, but they make up for it in software and services. And granted, obviously, I keep saying obviously, the fact that they're not selling consoles is certainly going to hurt their bottom line in many ways, because them not selling consoles means that they'll be getting fewer customers for the other services. But unlike PlayStation, they do have the fact that more people have more ways to play their games than just playing them on the consoles. And yes, of course, PlayStation obviously has also adapted in that they're starting to put their games on PC as well. But even with that being said, at least right now, PlayStation's not doing day one with their games apart from their live service games, like with Helldivers 2 and upcoming Concord, as well as, I guess, probably some of their like remasters, like Until Dawn, for example. But this is one of those things where it's so hard to say exactly what's going to happen with Microsoft. I do think that, as I've stated before, having Activision, Blizzard, King, having all of those things being the money makers that they are is going to make a big difference in how Microsoft can keep doing what they're wanting to do. But I also believe that there's going to certainly come points when you're still going to have people, you're still going to have Microsoft laying people off and potentially eliminating services, and depending on what the leadership decides to do going forward, we could very well eventually get to a point that Xbox as a console no longer exists. I don't know. It's just kind of all over the place, and it's impossible to predict the future. I just know that I think that there's more to... I think that they are going to make more money off of Activision, Blizzard, King as a whole than they're going to lose by not selling enough consoles. That's my opinion. But yeah. That's all I got.
Yeah. It definitely will likely lead to that being a how long this can last sort of thing, or how long the software can support the console loss, because I mean, they could bounce back in the hardware sales, but that probably might be just like a short-term thing. It might not be something that just endures for the long term. So yeah, that definitely, software definitely will help. Yeah, I mean, I do feel though that they shouldn't rely on Activision Blizzard. I think that they should really bolster the studios they already have though, and try to make bounce backs from there. I mean, for what they already have, because I mean, granted, they are doing stuff like with Fable, they're working on the game for that. They are working on the Perfect Dark game, so they are doing something there. But I do feel like they definitely have to buckle down and nail these, because if they release something that is mediocre, then it's really going to, people are really going to lose a lot of faith in them. I mean, considering the fact that to certain degrees their flagship Halo is sort of mixed in its reception currently. It's really tells that they needed like an outside force like Activision to really help them stay afloat, when you would expect their own in-house studios to be doing well. So I definitely feel like they shouldn't be banking everything on Activision. And I mean, not saying that they can't, use them to help prop themselves up for right now, but I think that, a year from now or further than that, they should definitely have their own lineup of games that stand up for themselves and just, wow people. I mean, regardless of how we feel about like Sony and how their games, at least they have games that are helping them stand up, and they don't have to rely necessarily on thank goodness they don't have to rely on Bungie, for example, to like help them with that aspect. So Microsoft definitely needs to be in that same position as Sony and also Nintendo, not having to rely on someone else to keep things going for them. Especially since that's the whole reason why they're still selling consoles in the first place.
Yeah, for sure. We'll keep an eye on it. That's all we can do. See how things go as we move forward. All right. Any other topics you wanted to talk about before we finish up for the night?
No, I don't think I have anything.
All right. Recommendations and dissuasions.
All right, so I am sort of having, kind of have two recommendations. So my first recommendation is to, if you have an old hobby or something you really enjoy doing, but you've stepped away from it for a while, go back to it. Go and pick up from where you last left it off. If there's something that you are, say, like working on, like say you were working on some sort of hobby, some craftsmanship sort of thing, go back, pick it up. You might enjoy it still. And even if you don't completely enjoy it the same way, if it's something that you just wanted to finish, now would be a good time to, no time better than the present to finish what you were working on. So that's recommendation one. Recommendation number two is a continuation of something I talked about last time, and that is with the Intel 13th and 14th gen CPUs. CPUs. And that is, Intel has put out a statement by now where they said that if your CPUs were damaged from the voltage problems that were occurring before, the fix will not undo any damage that has occurred. So the patch they're releasing next month, which is really this month, since by the time this video goes out will be August, it will not help you out. So if you had problems with your CPU because of what has happened, at this point, even though Intel hasn't been doing it, try to see if you can get an RMA for your CPU. But if not, just go ahead and get it replaced, because it won't get better for you, unfortunately. So definitely do that.
Yeah, that's definitely not good. It's making me think that probably whenever I have to get a new CPU, I'm probably just going with AMD instead. Because like if Intel's gonna have this big of an issue, it's like, it's not okay. It's just not. I mean, I've been happy with the Intel CPU that I have, which is the 9th gen. But man, that sucks.
Well, the good news is that it isn't too many people, but it's just like a large enough large enough percentage of people that it should be addressed. But so I mean, you could definitely wait and see like what happens.
Right, for sure. All right. Well, my recommendation. I'm actually. I know that I had something earlier and I didn't write it down. I did write down something though. So what I want to recommend is making super nachos. So, I mean, what exactly you put on those kind of just depends on your personal taste. For me, it's always cheese sauce, refried beans, taco meat. I prefer ground taco meat for the nachos. Sour cream, cilantro, pickled jalapenos. Of course, you can additionally do any other stuff that you like, but yeah, super nachos are super yummy. And it's funny, so the recipe that I put up this week was for pickled jalapenos, and I watched the video when it went up this morning. I was like, I want nachos for dinner now. So that's what we had for dinner. Although I didn't make it with refried beans or ground taco meat, just because my son is not as much a fan of that, and so I just made some carnitas because we had some in the freezer that I could just cook up, and did black beans instead of refried beans, which is still good, but just not as good. So anyway, super nachos. If for some reason you don't like nachos because you're crazy or whatever, or you just don't want to make something that fancy, or you don't want to get some at a restaurant, whatever, I also want to recommend Monk. It's a great show. We're almost done watching through it, and I mean, this isn't the first time I've watched through it. It's just been many years. We're on the last season now, and after we finish the season, then we'll finally watch the movie that came out, I think, last year. Something like that. It might have even been this year. I can't remember, but it's, set post-COVID. So it should be an interesting thing, especially with Monk being a germaphobe as it is. And, everything that follows that. And everything I've heard has been good. So I'm looking forward to checking it out. I'm hoping that there is some sort of clear crossover with Psych, because Psych had like a little brief reference to Monk at the end of its series, and since most of the gang who were on Psych ended up in San Francisco at the end of the series, it would be perfect to have them meet up in some way, some form or another, getting the fake psychic with Monk. So you got the two different versions of Sherlock Holmes, essentially. But yeah, I don't know that actually happens, but either way, I'll just tag onto that. Psych is also a recommendation because Psych is fantastic. All across the board. Okay, that's what I got.
Well, I definitely want to try out those nachos. I definitely will say that. So I'll need to look into getting ingredients next time I go shopping.
For sure. Yeah, and if you need ideas on how to make a good nacho cheese sauce, I think I got it down now to where it's pretty easy to do. The main thing is a roux. Start with a roux. Use evaporated milk. Then you got cheese. And instead of using Velveeta or anything like that, unless you just like Velveeta, to get that kind of tang, but also more of a creamy kind of thing, instead of it being more gritty like it typically is when you make with real cheese, use cream cheese.
Okay.
And then of course you also add liquid to it. Even just regular water does the trick. I do recommend, you start with some milk in order to get the initial creaminess, but then in order to keep it from being just a thick, goopy mess, you add some additional water to it to help thin it out so that it's more of an actual sauce, and then you can just season further if you need to get better flavor. But yeah.
Okay.
Very simple.
All right. Thank you. I'll definitely take that into consideration.
For sure.
So I also will have two dissuasions, and partially just the second one I just thought about, popped into my mind as I was thinking about my first recommendation, or second recommendation. So my original dissuasion was, don't take things for granted. A lot of times, we'll go through our lives and things will just be right as rain, but certain things, if they don't work, you never realize how important they were until they were gone. And just this past week, not having internet, it's something that is simple everyday thing here, but while it's gone, it's important. You see how crucial it is. So don't take certain things in your life for granted, because if you don't have them, or if they're not working, it definitely is a downer. And for one thing, just think about your health. If you're feeling sick and it really just messes with your day, then yeah, you definitely see how important that is for you. So that's recommendation number one. Dissuasion number one. My second dissuasion is piggybacking off my first point, which is, if you are buying used CPUs, don't buy used 13th or 14th gen Intel CPUs, because someone could be selling a CPU that is one that is damaged or not properly working. Now, granted, if it's someone you trust or someone who is very reliable, sure, go ahead. But I definitely would say don't buy any that are used, because you do not know what had happened in that person's computer. So don't take that risk.
Right. Agreed. All right. Well, my dissuasion is a very specific situation, but I mentioned it earlier. if you want to play Borderlands 3 on a Steam Deck, do not switch over to DirectX 11, because if you do, you will not be able to get into your game. You will get to the long loading screen, it will load for a little bit, and then it will crash. And it happens every single time, without fail, and just don't switch from DirectX 12, that's the default, leave it on that, and then you can customize settings as needed. And so, yeah, that's it. All right. Any final thoughts?
No, sir.
All right. Well, oh, no, wait. Where can people find you?
They can find me on my channel. I am Xeracon. That's IAMXERACON. So youtube.com/@IamXeracon. Obviously, no new content for me since I have no internet. I still have several topic ideas that I have in development. I'll just see like what happens. One of them will require certain stuff, so that we'll have to wait, obviously, when I get my internet back. But yeah, but essentially, once I do have that back up and running, I should definitely put them out. One of them, I think I mentioned before, was a topic about Batman and how people are saying he is fascist. So that'll be interesting to talk about. The other one, I can't remember what the other topic is, but that's something will probably come shortly after. But yeah, we'll see what happens. We'll see when those come out.
All right, very good. All right, well, you can find me on YouTube for my main gaming channel at The Frozen Gamer 87. This past week, I put out, or rather, this past Monday, I put out a comparison between Ni no Kuni 2 with the Steam Deck OLED and the Switch OLED. Very cool comparison. I'm still impressed with what the Switch can do, even though, of course, it's not running at 60 frames per second. But if Switch is all you have, it's well worth playing. It looks great, and if you don't mind 30 frames per second, it's perfectly fine. So, and then of course it's you can get a solid 60 on the Steam Deck, which is fantastic, much better, obviously. Everybody agrees. As for beyond that, of course, this Friday will be the 10th Dads and Gaming interview going up. That is with a gentleman by the name of Victor Herrera, also better known by the Married to the Games community as Beer Money Vic. Great interview. I really enjoyed talking to him, and so yeah, that one is going up this Friday, same time as this podcast. So by the time you hear this, unless you're listening to the audio-only version very early in the morning before the video version drops, it drops at both the video version of this and the video of the Dads and Gaming podcast are dropping at 7 a.m. Central Time on Friday, August 2nd. And then, of course, my next comparison that's going to be going up, also Steam Deck and Switch OLEDs, is for Borderlands 3, and that's going to be a great one as well to check out. Then as far as my cooking channel, that is Not Authentic But Delicious at NABD Cooking. With that, this past Wednesday, because I've switched my published days to Wednesday, I guess it technically is today as of recording. So Wednesday, let me try to say this again. Wednesdays are when I'm publishing recipes now. This week, I published a recipe for pickled jalapenos, making them from scratch. It's very easy, very cheap. I mean, not the pickled jalapenos in general are expensive. They're actually really cheap, but better than store-bought because you can actually get them a lot more spicy, which makes them significantly better. And they're just great. So that recipe is up. I don't know what I'm doing for next week's recipe yet. It may end up being my Huevos Rancheros pizza, but I have not decided yet because I have to talk with my wife and see if she wants to do that this Friday or want to save that for the following week. It's possible there might not be anything though. I honestly just don't know right now because I haven't figured out what I'm making. Something else I have contemplated making was some kind of pasta. Oh yes, buffalo chicken pasta. I was thinking of potentially making that. I made mac and cheese the other day from scratch, and using the same method for the cheese sauce that I mentioned for the queso, and then I just added some shredded, or rather, I mixed up some shredded rotisserie chicken with buffalo sauce, which was basically just a mixture of Frank's Red Hot sauce, Cholula, some habanero hot sauce, and some butter, and then mixed that with the meat. And I kept it separate for because the kids weren't going to want it, but we added it. My wife and I added it to our mac and cheese, and it was really good. I think when I do that though, whether that's in the near future or later, I'm probably going to do like mixing in, of course, mixing up the chicken with the buffalo sauce, putting it in with the mac and cheese, mixing that all up, and then topping it with crumbled blue cheese and green onions, because those go well with buffalo. I think that would be really good, and it'll probably look really cool too. So that's like an added bonus, but we'll see what happens with that. Anyway, as far as being able to contact us with this podcast, you can of course find us on YouTube, and you can comment on the video version of the podcast. Of course, the audio only version goes up every Friday at midnight Central Time, and that is on all major podcast platforms. So YouTube Music, Spotify, Apple Music, iHeartRadio. I can't remember all the different platforms. There's a bunch of them. But anyway, basically any major podcast platform, you're going to be able to find the podcast, the audio only version, if you don't care about the video. If you do want to see our mugs, if you want to see any of the gameplay clips that we've recorded for games we've been playing over the week or other trailers, you just like something that's a little more dynamic than just listening to a podcast, you can, of course, find that on YouTube. That goes up every Friday at 7 a.m. Central Time. And one thing I will note, in case it wasn't obvious, is that even though we record this as a video, the audio and video version, in terms of audio, are going to be exactly the same. Because I start with the video version, I add music to it, and then I publish it both in audio form, audio only form, and in video form. So there's that. But you can contact us apart from commenting on the videos. You can also email us, theorangeboxpodcast@gmail.com. Whether you have comments, questions, you want to insult us, tell us we're stupid, tell us we're ugly, whatever. You can additionally reach us through Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it, and that is at theorangeboxpod. You can find us there as well, although realistically, there's not a whole lot of stuff being put up there apart from reposting the podcast every week. I may eventually go back to Twitter occasionally, but typically, even if I'm on there, it's like once a week. So you're not going to see a whole lot there, but it's still a way to contact us if you want to. And of course, if you don't, no problem, because the reality is that we're going to talk for 2 to 2.5 hours, probably every week, because this is how we catch up, how we get to talk about what video games we've been playing, so on and so forth. It's a good outlet. So regardless of whether we have 0 listeners or 1,000 listeners or whatever, we're just going to keep talking every week. So we've gone 43 weeks straight, technically 45 weeks straight, because we had 2 episodes that didn't work out because of recording issues on my side of things. But we still have... We've been going strong almost a year now, getting close to a year. So we're keeping that up, enjoying it every week. I don't think there's anything else on that front. So, all right, now is your real last chance. You got anything else?
No, I thought I had something, but I don't think I have anything.
Okay. All right, well, until next time. No, back up. I am the Frozen Gamer 87. That is I am Zeracon. We are the Orange Box Podcast, and until next time, make some meals from scratch. Orange Box Podcast, out.